Hallo und herzlich willkommen zu der neuesten Team Pro Fitness Podcast Episode, deinem Podcast rund um Training, Ernährung und die Bühne. Today's episode is going to be in English, so let's switch right into it. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode on the Team Pro Fitness Podcast. Today I'm really excited to have a special guest on the show, Stephen Beaugrand. I hope I spell it the right way.
I'm sure you'll be fine.
Yeah. Who's an experienced athlete and a great coach in the bikini division, but not only. We'll be diving into a really important topic today, how to navigate a contest prep successfully, especially for women competing in the bikini class. We will talk about the biggest mistakes athletes make during prep, what should you be doing instead, how to prepare for the prep before it even begins, and last but not least, how to transition smoothly into the post-show phase, which is just as important as the prep itself. But before we jump into it, Stephen, I'm super happy to have you here. Could you quickly introduce yourself to the listeners? Maybe tell us a bit about your background, how you got into competing, coaching, and what you're currently working on.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for having me first and foremost. It's been cool to be able to keep up the relationship and with you after meeting you in Rome. God, it was what, 4 years ago, it feels like now. But my name is Stephen Beaugrand, obviously. You've already said that. I have my master's degree in exercise science with a concentration in strength and conditioning from the University of South Florida here in Tampa. So I'm located in the United States, in Florida. For those of you who know where that is, sunshine and beach. So, we would always kind of see people in, bikinis and swimsuits and stuff, and you just kind of got used to seeing people in shape out here. It's pretty popular. Obviously, it works well over there in Europe too. We were just talking about that. You guys tend to be more active. But I was not somebody who was into fitness or lifting weights at all. In fact, I didn't really start lifting weights until 24. And that's when I started getting into it. And that was right around the time Bikini and Men's Physique came out. So 2015, or actually, I'm sorry, 2013 was my first show. And that was after about 2 years of lifting, and I did men's physique. And it really, honestly, just made me angry because I got dead last. I got 17th out of 17, and I was just pissed off about it. So I had a chip on my shoulder. And I said, well, I'm going to do better and I'm going to learn better. And that was the time when like Lane Norton was getting big on the bodybuilding.com forums and social media. And so I was very into the science-based and the evidence-based practices. Um, and so I decided to start school there. Um, Luckily enough, Lane is local as well. So we got to meet him in the lab. Um, Paul Ravella, the owner of Pro Physique, who I work with, was just taking a class during my undergraduate education. I met him, made a good impression. Apparently, he thought I was very smart. And then the rest is kind of history. I was the first coach that he brought on. This year will be 10 years coaching with Pro Physique. I've been coaching a little bit longer than that. We've had as many as 24 coaches on staff. Interview. I make sure people know what they're talking about. I train. I am a resource for our coaches on staff in terms of when they have questions, how to peak, planning, how to deal with certain client situations, those kind of things. And I do a lot of behind the scenes work for our team as well, as obviously having my own um, client load. And, I've had as high as a second place IFBB Pro League placing for one of my athletes back in 2020, but still a few top fives with them a few years ago in their last season as well. So not too bad overall in terms of what we've done. And I've lost count of the overall wins at shows, I'll be honest.
A lot.
Yeah, a good amount. I'd say probably at least 60, just
Wow,
off the top of my
crazy.
head. But
Sixty.
it at a certain point, you're just like, okay, it's just another number.
Hmm.
Um, it's interesting because it, and I feel like a lot of people get turned off by this. I don't feel like my job as a coach is to win shows. I feel like my job as a coach is to get the most out of you possible, to bring your best. If you win shows with that, great. if you don't, then you still had the success, you still made progress, you still had all of those positives. You talked about some of the things before you're getting on stage and before you compete that I think are important for success. I think understanding that difference is one of the biggest things that really makes a difference in terms of the post-show experience later on. Um, because if you expected to win and the next Laurel Chapato shows up at your show, like I'm sorry, dude, it's probably not going to happen. You might get second in your class and they might win the overall. Like if your only qualifier for enjoying the experience in the show was that you won, that just went out the window on something you couldn't control.
Yeah. You can't control who's going on stage with you, who's competing, how the judges maybe see it because it changes, especially in the bikini
Yes.
division. It's always different. I mean, how was your first experience now in Europe seeing the shows in comparison to USA?
So I was pretty lucky. I didn't, and I've plenty of amateurs over there as well. I think in general, the conditioning is much more important than anything else from what I've seen overseas or in Europe.
Mm,
Um, you can have a more conditioned athlete that maybe has a little bit less muscle and maybe not quite as good shape, s still win the show over somebody that maybe here in the States, they would typically go for a little bit less conditioned, but better shape and muscularity, maybe more ready to be at that higher level. Um, and so I think we see that in the pro league as well over there. The conditioning is extremely lean. Um, and from what I see, a lot of the women are actually coming down into the show to fit the division. So they're dehydrating a bit into the show. So they're losing some of their muscle mass and volume to fit the criteria. But it also makes them that much harder.
mm,
Um, and it's if you look at Bikini Olympia, that's not the look. Um, the hard part is if you're doing shows in Europe, you have to be able to win a show in Europe, unless you want to travel somewhere else. And just traditionally, we don't see a lot of the women who are winning the shows in Europe really being in that like top five, top 10 at the Olympia. Um, and so I think there's a little bit of a disconnect there in terms of the peaking protocols and what they bring to stage that would, if they did it differently when they came here, would benefit them.
mm.
Or maybe it would even just benefit them to make sure that they're at the shows that Tyler's judging for the head judge, because he's obviously traveled over there to head judge shows. Um, and so just making sure they're in front of those Olympia level judges and those judges that are going to be on the Olympia panel, if that's where you're looking at going.
Yeah. I saw Evie. You know
Yes.
Evie? Yes, she was competing now, I think in USA. I don't know which show,
I
but
just saw her in Pittsburgh 2 weekends
mhm.
ago, and then she
Yeah,
competed again last weekend.
right. And she was al always, I think, top five.
She is in the pro shows,
Yeah.
but Olympia,
No, Olympia, no.
right? Um, and Evie, like she looks great. Sometimes she comes in really hard. I feel like her peaking isn't as consistent as maybe
Mm,
some of the other people, but that could simply be because she does so many shows. Um, but Evie's beaten my clients. Like I've seen her in person many times. She looks great. Uh, it's just one, she's short, so that can be difficult in terms of genetics determine who's going to be Miss Olympia. Let's be real.
mm,
Um, but I think that also just makes you look a little bit different compared to some of the other bodies that she gets next to on stage. Um, I think it can be a little bit easier to maybe go pro um, as a shorter athlete, but I think once you get to the pro league, it's a little bit harder. And Evie actually, so it was funny. My first pro was Chloe Margretner,
yeah.
and she went pro with Allison Tetsu and Evie Iskandar. So in the overall, it was Evie Iskandar in first, Chloe in second, and Allison in third
Mm,
at that show for the pro cards. So it was, I mean, there was a lot of talent. You had some pretty big names in European bikini pros all going pro at that same show, which was cool.
Yeah, that was maybe the one of the greatest moments as a coach, I think.
Yeah, it was interesting too because I wasn't able to be there in person, so I was watching the live stream here, and it was at the time when we had an office. We had maybe like five or six of our coaches there, and I just lost it. Uh, because Chloe's still one of my good friends. Like I still talk to her on a regular basis, even though she's done competing. Um, so it's just one of those things like when you invest in your people, like it's that much more fulfilling to see them succeed, um, because you know how hard they work. Um, and as a competitor, you know what it's like when you're low energy and when you're tired and when you're hungry and you still have a workout to do and you still have cardio to finish. And like you know that dinner's not quite going to be enough. You're like, well, I guess probably going to go to bed a bit hungry tonight, see if I can drink enough water to make up for it and just try and take some melatonin or something and knock out.
Yeah, that's really hard, and you follow the journey. So when the athlete is stepping on stage, it's always, for me, it's always emotional. It doesn't matter if it's the first show or maybe a national pro qualifier, pro show. It's always emotional because I know what every athlete is doing to compete, and that's all the up and downs. You get everything. As a coach, I think we are more than just a trainer that give you a meal plan or something like that or a macros training program. It's more. How you're coaching? If you can give us some insights, how do you work with your athletes and what's your philosophy?
So yeah, I mean, I just want to do the right thing, um, which is a weird thing to say. I think it's not something I typically hear in our space very often. Um, Sometimes the right thing is not doing a show. Sometimes the right thing is pushing a show back. Sometimes the right thing is saying, "Hey, we shouldn't compete right now until we deal with some other things." Um, so beyond the stage, I just want to make sure that I'm doing what's right for people. I've seen people in my career that have gotten into preps and not handled it well and gotten divorces, in partly because of that. Um, and so I try to be aware of how people are handling those things. Typically, my check-ins are once a week, at least whether it's off season, dieting season, prep, whatever. Um, Anything beyond that, I think is too much typically. You lose the forest for the trees, so to speak.
Hmm.
You need to have a little bit of an elevated view to be able to see the overall of what's going on. I currently use an app for all of my clients, which I think is pretty normal nowadays. There's a bunch of different ones, Trainerize, Coach, whatever, et cetera, et cetera. Um, I do the Loom video responses. I found, when I started, it was all email, Word documents and email. Uh, but I don't think that the industry supports that anymore. I think the expectation is most certainly a little bit more, as much convenience as possible. People want things to look nice. They want them to work right. And so I find that's been a nice thing. But the emails, it was easy to get misinterpreted. So the video responses, if you can hear a voice, you can hear inflection and tone, you can see facial features and expressions. It's much more difficult to misinterpret, which is nice. Um, and we just make sure we keep the plan. So we have goals on board and we keep countdowns on those. Um, we make sure that we're paying attention to the look, how the athlete's feeling, and just make sure that, the goal should always be to be ready a few weeks early. I don't count peak week as a week of dieting for fat loss. Most people lose weight, sure. But if you're not ready before, you're not going to really truly be ready for the day of. So you have to be a little bit ahead of it. And I just try and be supportive. Uh, One of the things that also got me when I started coaching was the unprofessionalism that a lot of coaches
Hmm.
utilize. People waiting a week for responses, 4 or 5 days for responses, to simple questions or check-ins. I was like, that's unacceptable. I mean, if it's not within 24 hours, like something's wrong.
Yeah.
And then people just being treated poorly. Like, how dare you ask me questions as a coach? Like, isn't that our job as coaches, is to know why we're asking people to do things, to know and to be able to explain that to them. So I've always said trust the process is crap. It's nonsense. It should be understand the process. If I can help you understand the process, then one, I've empowered you to hopefully not have need of me long term forever. Um, and two, it's easier for you to take hold of that and to have that autonomy and control yourself. And perhaps it's like part of my, we call it like neurodivergent nature, like ADHD kind of vibes. Um, I'm not good at doing things unless I know the why behind them. If I have the why behind them, it's very easy for me to get motivated, to get excited, and to be invested. If somebody just tells me to do something because they said so, like it's never going to happen. Um, and so I always found that helping other people to understand why we need to do something or why maybe pushing harder this week when you're not sleeping and your hair is falling out and your training is crap, maybe pushing harder isn't the right answer for us. And these are the reasons why. And they're like, oh, so now you don't have to just trust me. It's great if you do, but I've explained the why behind it. So that trust is reinforced with something else. And so now when we actually take that different approach and we see the results, it's just one more thing to kind of benefit. All right, cool. We're doing the right things. It's not always necessarily just do more.
Yeah, yeah. It's great. I really like how you're working and that you, like you said today, the requirements they from the clients are bigger. They want maybe a video check-in, a fast responses, but with quality. And yeah, I heard from other athletes clients that yeah, some coaches even here in Germany they wait for sometimes a week for a response. And that shouldn't be the standard. The standard should be, like you said, 24 hours response time. And maybe for, I don't know if you work with WhatsApp or something like that to more quickly, to respond more
Oh,
quickly.
yeah, I'm not good with my text messages. If it's not on my calendar or an email, and thankfully the app also has messaging in it.
Ah, okay, okay.
So the app kind of fills that void for me because
Mm.
if somebody texts me on my personal phone, I have people do that during peak week. I get back to them, but it's very easy for me to miss that or to
Hmm.
see it and forget about it. Um, so I try and eh, train my clients to work within the bounds that help me to be also more on it and accountable to making sure that I'm holding up my end of the bargain on those things.
You said at the beginning that you're an academic, so you studied. Not a lot of coaches started before. I don't think it's necessary, but it's good to have a solid base of knowledge. And how do you keep on um, stay up to date and learn more and more about maybe the science and the new things that we learn? Do you, because I said oftentimes, yeah, maybe read the mess member,
Yeah.
the mess, or I read some studies, I listen to podcasts, I read books. But most of my learning is right now, after 20 years, is working with the clients and
Yeah.
then solving the problems.
So, you know, there's evidence-based practice and then there's best practice. So, best practice is what we want to use. This is a blend of what we see in person and empirical data, and then what the studies and the science says. Uh, so, if I only used what the studies said, the things I do would be very different. And you could almost never work with competitors. There's no real data on competitors, very little. So we're really extrapolating a lot of data from general population studies, maybe college athletics studies, those kinds of things, and then applying it in ways that make sense. I think that The biggest thing that having a university degree and having experience in doing studies and research does is it gives you a we'll call it a Shiza sensor, right?
Mhm.
So it allows you to sniff out stuff that just doesn't make sense. The more of an understanding you have of how the body works, how water balance works, how electrolytes work, how training adaptation works and stimulus, the easier it is to kind of write off, I think, a lot of people in the industry. Um, because generally speaking, it's pretty circular. Keto was hot, now it's not. Now,
Mm,
next it'll be high carb, low fat, then it'll be high protein, then it was carnivore, then it was and it just goes around. I'm just waiting for the 90s fashions to come back. It's the
mm.
same with that, right? And so what happens is there's a lot of really good salespeople in what we do. There's a lot of people who sell themselves to you, and they market well. And social media really helps with that because, when you have stuff that's, gets a lot of hate or love, it's extremes. That's what it rewards. And so the biggest thing that I see is, there's a lot of what we call in the early 1900s here in the States, snake oil salesmen.
Yes, yes.
They're selling you crap. Um, the truth of the matter is anybody can starve somebody into being lean. Like it's not hard to tell you to eat less and move more. The trick that I think separates the best coaches is how do we do that in a way that's feasible and reasonable long term for you, so that not only do we lose weight, but we keep it off. Some competitors, this is a big piece of them being successful in the future, right? If you have to lose 30 kilos to get ready for stage, like you're not going to get ready for stage in one diet. You need to lose, 15, 20 kilos, which is still a lot, and then keep that off, recover, come back. But also, how do we do it in a way where we keep as much muscle as possible? Like I said, depending on which judge you're in front of, they may make that more important or less important in their judging criterion. But there, at no point do you want to lose muscle. That's what takes the longest time to build. That's the hardest part of the process. So, how do we do it where we minimize muscle loss, make it the best experience it can be? Is it going to suck? Probably at some degree. Does it need to suck really bad the entire time? Absolutely not. Um, you know, those I think are the things that really set apart successful coaches from non-successful coaches, when you don't just look at the marketing. And one other thing that I would say that I don't think enough people look at when looking at coaches is uh, they'll look at pro card wins. What does a pro card win matter if that person never competes again? Um, so some of these coaches, they might have a lot of pro card wins, but then those people disappear
Mm.
and they're done competing. Um, well, yeah, you have extreme approaches. That's what happens. I wouldn't want to compete ever again if all I thought competition was 800 calories a day and 2 hours of stairs every day. Like, nope, I would be done with the sport. But, my last contest prep, the lowest my low days got was 200 protein, 225 carb, and 60 fat, with
Nice.
2 high days on top and an hour of walking for cardio. That's not going to be the case for everybody, but like that wasn't that bad,
Yeah.
you know?
Was not so much stress on the system.
Yeah, I mean, I remember being at some of these shows in like Alicante and hearing people talk about losing like 10 kilos, 12 kilos in a week
In a
by just
week.
doing, yeah. And I'm just like, yo, that is insanity. Like that's crazy, man. Like, in what world does that sound like a good a good idea?
And then the problem is, I think maybe we can dive into it because that was my first topic to talk about the biggest mistakes during the prep. So yeah, I see some coaches. I don't want to say, oh, all the coaches are bad. No, there are a lot of great coaches. I
Yes.
have here one in the podcast. So, but sometimes I see this crazy protocols like eating nothing and eating just fish and spinach and maybe a rice cake here and there, 2 hours of cardio, and not for a week or two, but for months.
Yep.
And I think a lot of coaches lack the knowledge and they maybe compensate with using drugs? Or
A,
how do you see it?
a thousand percent. Because the drugs help you retain muscle with those kinds of crazy protocols. And so essentially what they're doing is they're starving you, and you would end up in a really bad spot in terms of your muscularity and stuff as well. I think one of the greatest examples that we can use is people who get on the GLP-1 medications nowadays and don't exercise. They don't do any kind of lifting or weight training or athletics. And you see them just become very, very skinny.
Hmm.
Um, and it's a very different look. And that's what that kind of protocol would essentially cause without the drugs to keep muscle retention. Um, but th those drugs shouldn't be necessary. I'm actually like my passion is natural athletes.
Mm.
Um, like that's who I love coaching. That's what I love doing. Um, and so, yeah, I have a couple of enhanced athletes, but I kind of stay out of it for the most part in terms of what they're doing. I just say kind of let me know so that I can manage your training and your nutrition appropriately. But I mean, dude, I've had a male athlete that for the last 5 days of his peak week was eating 800 carbs a day going into a show,
Crazy.
you know? And when he came to me, he was eating, God, what was it? 150 carbs a day is what his coach had him on. And this guy
Wow.
is, 230 pounds.
Wow.
So like, yeah, it just, for me, it doesn't make sense. But that's where questions have to come in. It it's a dangerous thing to trust anyone blindly. Like you should never trust me blindly. So, but as a coach, we're put into this position of power and authority in people's lives. They put us there. They expect that we know what we're talking about and that we have their best interests in mind in some way, shape, or form. That's simply not the case for everybody, unfortunately. So I do think that one of the best ways to kind of stay away from those really dangerous prep protocols and approaches is to ask questions. And if your coach isn't asking questions, like that should be a red flag too. Like, did they not ask you where your food was at before you started prep? Did they not ask you what your dieting history was or the last time that you were in a diet? Did they not ask you how long you've been training? I I've seen girls that have been training for 3 months get with the coach because they want to do a show, and the coach puts them on drugs. I was
Crazy.
like, they're gonna gain probably 10 pounds of muscle this year just just training.
Mm.
Like no, nothing else. Just naturally with introductory gains. Why would you put them on drugs? It makes no sense to me.
It's
Um,
because maybe this coaches want the pro cards, the wins. It's about marketing.
and I think unfortunately there are a lot of very successful coaches that operate in this manner.
Mm.
Um, it's not unfortunate for them. They're successful, right? They're making tons of money and everybody thinks they're great. It's unfortunate for the people that they work with that get left behind. Um, and for some of them, the rates they charge is absolutely exorbitant.
What we're talking about? So how is like exorbitant? Too much, um,
I've seen
too
six
much
hundred
cost.
dollars a month for prep.
Okay.
8,000, $9,000 a year for coaching. Uh, I mean, I'll be honest, I just don't think what we do is worth that much.
Me
Like,
either.
I love my job. I do think it matters. I think it's worth something, but I don't think it's worth that.
Mm,
But people will pay it um, because this person gets pro cards.
yes.
And so they just look at the study of pro card and then they validate whatever I have to do to do that. But what happens if maybe sure you get a pro card, but you're not going to be successful in the pro league? You're going to be one of those people that struggle to get into top fives at a show. You just don't, your shoulders aren't maybe wide enough. Your how your deltoids insert just don't quite have that roundness and shape that they're normally looking for. Maybe your glutes, like the way that those insert, you kind of have that shelf at the top instead of the roundness that they're really looking for, you know? Well, then what did you give up to get there, if that's the ceiling, so to speak, which nobody likes to talk about because that doesn't sell anything. Um, and then what are the repercussions of that that may be long term? You know, a lot of people are talking more about the virilization of women that
Mm.
happens from a lot of the PEDs. That stuff never goes back. Like that's permanent,
No, the deeper
never going away.
voice, the clitoris enlargement, and so on.
Hmm.
That's
The change
for
in the jawline and
yeah.
facial structure. You can see receding hairlines. Hair loss can happen with it too, depending. I mean, these are real things.
Mm.
And that doesn't even get into the fact that, like, if you're in your 20s, I, I never thought about having kids in my 20s. But if I had done a bunch of stuff in my 20s that could possibly make having kids much more difficult, well, I would have regretted that now being in my late 30s. Um, and so, those PEDs, you're messing with hormones. You're messing with the things that regulate your fertility and your ability to reproduce to some degree. And I've definitely seen people that come out of these protocols and PED programs and like they're all over the place. There's a reason that getting your menstrual cycle back was such a huge ordeal in our industry for years, you know? Um, it's because
Mm.
people had issues with it from extreme dieting and from some of them PED usage.
So one of the biggest mistakes is to not really do your research as an athlete and search for the right coach, because not searching for how many pro cards do you win, but more talking maybe about with the other athletes in the team and to ask how are they working, or what would be your advice to the people out there that listen now, that search now for a new coach, or for the first time they want to work with a coach, how to find the right one?
I mean, look at what they do and look about how they talk about it and see if that aligns with your values. If your value is pro card, then some of those coaches may align with your values. And hey, power to you. Um,
Mm.
but then I think also make sure that you're getting an opportunity to actually speak with them and see who they are as a person. Uh, I know some coaches that I would consider very good, successful coaches, you know, but they can be tough to work with. It's my way or the highway. If you don't like that, I'm not the coach for you.
Mm.
Um, and I've had some people switch over to me from them, and it's like, I mean, honestly, the plan looks really good. They're like, no, I didn't have any problem with that. It was just a personality thing. And maybe that's what some people need. They need tough love. I'm not the coach for them, you know? I'm much more even keel, and I try to keep my emotions out of it as much as possible.
Mhm.
Um, it's hard when they're on stage. Like once I'm at a show and seeing people on stage, that's when the emotions come out, or after the show. Um, but going into it, I try to stay very even keel. So I think if you're not getting an opportunity to talk to them and like watch their podcast, see what they speak about, how they speak about other people, those kind of things. Uh, I think those are all normally pretty good indicators. Um, some people don't put out much information at all. All
Mm.
right, they could be a good person, but how will you know that? You have to reach out. So I think what a lot of people, the problem happens is they put out an inquiry to one person and sign up with them. I think the best bet is to put out multiple, talk to different coaches, get different opinions, see who invests in you before you've put any money on the table. See who's willing to get on the phone with you and talk to you for half an hour or so, whatever. Um, and then make a decision there for what you feel like is the right decision for you.
Mm.
And then don't see a show and say, I'm going to compete. See a show, say, okay, I want to compete, but too many people rush it. Um, and there have not been many, if any, things in life that I have rushed that have ended as well as they could have. So I think having a little bit more patience at that start, controlling some of that excitement, it is exciting. It's a cool idea. Not many people do this.
Mm.
It's a big deal. It's a lot of work. But I think taking that excitement and making sure you keep it controlled so that it's not allowing you to put yourself in a position where, you know, God, I've literally had people reach out to me during peak week to take over on a Wednesday.
Oh shit. I had
Yeah.
this too. I had this the same every year. Some people reach out 2 weeks out. Oh, can you help me to fix this?
And it's not so it's not I don't enjoy that as a coach. It's not good for you as an athlete. Like I don't know your body at all. A lot of the time, if that's the case, it's pretty easy to be better than what they were doing. But is it their best? No. And can I really take credit for that in terms of being a coach? I mean, I don't always want to, but even if I do, no. I mean, I was only involved in it for a month, 2 months, a couple days. Um, and so I think that's not as fulfilling of an experience for me as a coach either. So will I do it? Yeah. Is it my preference? No. I would much rather that we set you up for success from day one.
Yes, for sure. And what are the biggest mistakes during the prep? So before starting with the prep, maybe you should have the right coach, working with the coach, and maybe setting up the right, like you said, eating enough calories, having good
Yep.
nutrition, good recovery. But during the prep, what are the biggest mistakes that you see?
I think most in prep mistakes come from people rushing it and not doing the pre-prep stuff.
Hmm. Hmm.
If you have a reasonably healthy approach to nutrition, when you start prep, it's not like everything is changing. There's so many people that I've seen when they're in their off season and outside of prep. They're just eating whatever they want. They're not eating very many fruits and vegetables. They're not necessarily focused on lean meats or less processed food options. And maybe that's less of an issue for you guys in Europe since, the food culture is a little bit different. Um, that's how I say it nicely. Um, but I think a lot of it stems from that. Oh, I would get stressed out and I would overeat. Well, that's a problem that should have been off season dealt with. Like we should have. So a lot of those things I think either fly under the radar unnoticed, and that's what
Hmm.
creates problems within the actual prep itself or the dieting phase. Because there's no way a 12-week prep is short, right? Um,
Yes.
so just think in 3 months, what's the likelihood that you're not going to have some sort of highly stressful situation? It's very unlikely that that's going to happen. So if your stress response is to go into snack or to eat, or I had coached a lot of people with children to eat your kids' foods and to take extra niblets and bites, well, that's going to happen in prep. If your stress response is I don't sleep well, that's going to happen in prep. And so, like in prep, stress is going to increase. And so, one of the things I will say in prep that even experienced people with a good base do encounter and can mess up is the push through everything mentality. The only work harder. Okay, well, if I'm not getting good sleep and my training's not good, and I've been low calories and we're doing a lot of cardio and we're pushing hard and I'm not responding. Okay, well, maybe the answer isn't just to continue to try and push harder. Maybe the answer is, okay, well, let's pull back a little bit. Let's give you a little bit more free time. We'll cut the cardio a little bit. That way we can get planning done, or hopefully we can get better sleep and more quality sleep. We can do things to manage stress better because, physiological stress and psychological stress both go into the same pool. Okay, well, maybe we can do that. And so now that we're sleeping a little bit better, we're feeling more recovered. Well, guess what? Now, when we're walking to the station, maybe we're walking a little bit quicker. Now, when we're doing our cardio, maybe we're doing it just a little bit more intensely. Now, when we're lifting that extra 2.5 or 5 kilos. Ah, see, I'm trying to go to metric. Um,
You can say it
um,
in pounds. It's fine.
I know. In Freedom Eagles, right? Uh, yeah. But so all those little things add up.
Hmm.
Because one of the things that happens is you get into prep, calories get low, cardio gets high, you get tired. Well, if I'm not taking the dog for a walk this as many times, I don't get up to change the channel on the television. I don't I'm not getting the same amount of weight. Those are all calories I'm not expending. That can build up and be pretty darn important throughout prep. Um, so when that starts happening, I find, and this is where having a long enough prep gives you the power to do this, taking a step back, taking a diet break, really helps to address that. A lot of times people will go on a diet break and they'll lose weight right there. They'll drop
Hmm.
inflammation. Maybe digestion speeds back up. That's another normal thing that happens. Peristalsis, or the speed at which food moves through our digestive system, it slows as we diet so that our body has more time to digest and pull nutrients out. It's a good thing for survival, but most of the things that are good for survival aren't necessarily good for prep. We want our bodies being the guy at the gentleman clubs with a stack of bills, just making it rain.
Mm.
We want it throwing all the calories out as much as we can so that we can get lean and do it as easily as possible. So I think the recovery aspect of things is what's hard, um, probably for a plethora of reasons. I'm sure you have your opinions on why some of that is too.
Yes, for sure. You said one thing about a diet break, and I see the same, especially with natty competitors. It's really important because at some point you push maybe a little bit more cardio, then you lower the calories, then the mental stress is increasing because especially women, they maybe stress more because they maybe
I would say
compare.
I have it the opposite.
You have the
Um,
opposite, okay?
most of my women
Gotcha.
dieting, they're good. That doesn't stress them out.
Crazy.
It's the guys that get stressed out once calories get to a certain
Really?
point. Yeah.
They're more, yeah, maybe they feel more the fatigue or the hunger pains, and maybe the women they are more resilient. So
I think women tend to have more diet history.
yeah,
So there's
yeah,
definitely some more resilience there. And I think if you look at the social concepts, historically, the lighter a woman has been, the better. And for guys, they're always trying to get heavier. So when a
yes.
woman's dieting, it's kind of fulfilling that societal expectation, whether that's right or wrong. But to some degree, like it doesn't necessarily feel wrong in terms of what other people outside put on us.
Mm.
As for guys, it's kind of fighting that internal, but I want to be big. I want to be big and strong. And so I think a lot of guys struggle with that.
Yeah, that's maybe the problem because some guys are don't getting in great shape because they want to reach a certain weight and they don't want to go under. So I want to have, let's say, 200 pounds or 90 kilos. I don't want to go to 88. Then I'm small, and then they're not
Yeah.
in shape. So that's the problem.
Yeah. I mean, but for those people, the them putting that weight on there, normally when they think about the weight they want to be for stage, they need to probably subtract anywhere from like 3 to 6 kilos from that.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's what
for
they
sure.
should be on stage at.
That's more than a lot of people, a lot of men want to hear. But
Yes.
yeah, I think stress management is one of the biggest variables to get in shape and to be, let's say, as healthy as possible during the prep, especially for women. Do you see a big, let's say, when you work with women, do you work different than with men? For example, doing diet breaks, you see more benefits for the woman as for a man, or with refeeds? Because what I see when I do a double refeed for 2 days with women that have problems with the digestion or with the bowel movements, it helps a lot. And with men, I will say it's maybe the same, but I can see more benefits for women, especially for the hormones, because uh, they women are they're feeling more the diet because the hormones going down, the thyroid's going down, The sexual hormones are dropping. For example, estrogen,
Mhm.
or testosterone. And I think we men are more resistant, yeah, for the dieting. So we can go lower with the body fat without feeling too much reduction in the hormones. Not so fast like for the woman.
So I think if you're talking about natural athletes, I think it's a
Hmm.
misconception that there's a difference. I think men tend to be less expressive and communicative, generally
Hmm.
speaking. Um, but as we get leaner, our fat cells, based on their size, secrete a hormone called leptin. And what most people know this as is a hunger hormone. So the less leptin we produce, the hungrier we are. But the less leptin we produce, our brain senses that as well, and then down regulates our sex hormone production. So it happens with men and women. I think most times people who look at men, those men aren't what we would consider natural competitors. They're normally on something like a testosterone replacement therapy, if not more, normally more. And so the biggest one that's going to impact men is testosterone. And we see that in some of the studies with men as they age in terms of quality of life can go down as testosterone goes down. And something like testosterone replacement can help restore quality of life, like depressive symptoms, overall energy, those kind of things. And we know testosterone can be therapeutic for women as well. But I think the women a lot of the time the estrogen or the estradiol is a little bit bigger of an impactor for them. And so that testosterone isn't maybe not, they're normally not as high on testosterone anyways. You'll have plenty of women that come back like a 6 or a 10, on their blood work, nanograms per deciliter for
Hmm.
testosterone. So it tends to be really low anyways. And their estrogen will fluctuate based on their cycle. What I look for in general is what I call biofeedback. So, is training poor? Like, do the weights that felt really good last week all of a sudden feel really heavy, or we couldn't even do that? Are we not sleeping well? Are we more irritable than normal lately? Like, are we snapping at our partners, or our kids? Are we not as able to pay attention? That brain fog that happens from some of the low carb diets and high expenditure stuff. Has libido changed? Is our sex drive different? Is it significantly lower than whatever is normal for you? Um, so those are the things that I'm looking for in terms of a biological feedback, and normally pair that with we're not seeing progress when in all arguments we should be seeing progress. Um, the refeeds I normally just include once I hit a certain place
Hmm.
in terms of calorie deficit or how low calories get. Um, Normally it's a double refeed. I don't typically use the single refeeds anymore.
Okay. What? Why?
Digestion is one of the reasons why.
Hmm.
If you're being that much more aggressive with a single day, that means all that food's going in a shorter amount of time. Um, which is why the same reason I like the linear loading for peak week. Um, if you're trying to fit 800 grams of carbs in a day, for example, and you're used to 200, that's not going to work well with your digestive system, most likely. Um, so it's much easier to maybe do 5 or 600 for a couple of days, for example. So, or say maybe you are at 150 grams of carbs. If we do a 300 or 350, that's a lot. But if we did a 250, 275 for a couple of days, not as big of a change. So the digestive system can keep up with it a little bit more.
Hmm.
Um, and it is one of those nice things that can kind of maybe get the digestive system moving a little bit quicker again, um, as well. I feel like it's funny because my female clients will say, "Hey, coach, I don't mean to complain, but," and then they'll actually tell me how they're feeling. My male clients, generally are speaking, it's very short check-ins,
Yeah, yeah,
not a
always.
ton, and so they're not as communicative. So I have to ask them more questions to see how they're actually feeling, before I can kind of dig down deep if I see that they're not responding.
Hmm.
Um, but I mean, these things are all important. The thyroid hormone.
I saw some studies about the thyroid hormones that even leptin women are reacting more quickly to a reduction in T3, for example. I
Mhm.
think 30% in 1 week. and leptin the same. And then for the man, it needs a little bit more time until the
Yeah.
body responds and adapts.
And that's a important delineation too, because a lot of times if they're looking at stuff, they'll maybe only look at TSH or T4.
Mm,
Um, and that might not be indicative. T3 is the active form that T4 gets converted to within the cell, which is why some coaches are saying that we should be looking at reverse T3 as an indicator for thyroid health as well.
hmm
Some of the studies that I've seen for thyroid, um, and if you talk to Dr. Joe Klemczewski, that's the guy that essentially invented If It Fits Your Macros, um, who's just an amazing person. One of his talks was on the fact that the change in thyroid hormone doesn't actually necessarily change metabolism itself as much as what people think it does. My um, interpretation of that is we know again therapeutic can be a very fine line. I think that what ends up happening is as that goes down, that therapeutic piece happens. That's why the biofeedback can be important. Are you feeling tired all the time? Are you feeling like it's hard to concentrate? Um, if hair is falling out, you know you have real big problems.
mm,
Um, but like that's normally when I'm like, okay, we need to put a pause on prep and we need to get you feeling better again and get this resolved because prep's only going to make that worse. But I think they just move less. They don't get as many steps. They don't get cardio the same. Like I said, the same thing of that tiredness that comes in. Just the intensity of stuff goes down, and their activity level is probably um, more of a factor for that change in expenditure and response. I would say at least for most,
yeah.
um, based on what I've seen thus far in my research.
No, I see the same. Sometimes I have clients, female clients that are really eating not a lot because yeah, they don't burn a lot. And we really track everything, and I'm sure they don't cheat. And then I take the blood labs, the T3, T4, TSH, reverse T3, and then I see, yes, everything is fine. So you don't have male function, wrong function of your thyroid. So you're healthy, but you still need to go low with the calories. And I have for now, right now, I have one client. If she's listening to this podcast, she's tall. She's, I think now 22 or 23 years old. And her function, her T3 is low right now during the prep, is under the reference, okay?
Right.
But she's eating a lot of carbs and she's eating really good. So we don't do a lot of cardio. She's dropping every week. But she has some symptoms in terms of the bowel movements.
Mhm.
That's the only thing, but she's dropping really good weight. So I see the same thing what Joe was t yeah talking about, that not the thyroid levels in the blood, they are not always indicating if you have a good metabolism or not. But that's really important to say, like you said, to listen to the biofeedback.
Yep.
That's really, really important as a coach.
Well, I mean, if you don't, how are your people going to succeed?
Yeah.
Uh, if you're having bad biofeedback and you feel terrible and you're still 8 weeks out from the show, is it realistic to expect you to feel terrible for the next 8 weeks into the at least the first show? And that's assuming you don't have more than one scheduled. Um, like so you're not even going to make it to stage most likely at that point. You're going to end
Mm.
up overeating and binging and having other issues. Um, this is the hard part. And again, it goes back to genetics to some degree, right? Some people, and you know this, it's like you make one change to their diet, and that's the only thing you did all prep, and they got stage lean. And other people, you're like, man, I've done everything I can. I've done every single possible thing I could possibly think of. I've diet breaked. I've used refeeds. We've gone to the maximum extreme that I'm willing to go to. And this is just it. And I think that that is a hard pill for some people to swallow that, like, all right, maybe we're not going to get quite lean enough. Like maybe that's not in the cards, at least not now. Maybe if we can stay leaner coming out and do some things in the off season, sure. But maybe the deck's stacked against me, you know?
Mm, mm,
And that's the truth for some people. My wife is one of them. We tried to diet her a few years ago, and I had her down at like 35 grams of fat and 70 carbs a day for her low days, like crazy aggressive, and a lot of cardio. And her body was just like,
nope.
nope. And I was like, no, we're done. Like we tried it for a few weeks. We were a little bit less aggressive before that, but it's just not happening. And
Yeah,
I'm not willing to put you in a place where I'm going to starve you more than that.
yeah. That's maybe 1,000 calories or how much
Yeah, she was
was.
about at 1100.
Yeah, that's and then
Um,
cardio too. Yeah, that's
so
hard. And then
yeah,
if the body's not responding, what do we want to do? So,
and I'll be honest, like I think one of the things people don't talk about, which is a lot of people in the sport, is the anxiety.
hmm,
Uh, I don't think that people give the mental health component of our lives enough credit for the role that it plays in prep.
yeah.
'Cause I cannot tell you how many people I've seen that are high anxiety people. And as soon as they get anxious, oh, now IBS rears its ugly head. And now digestion is just terrible. And their stomach hurts and they're gassy and like everything's off. And their weight's up 3 pounds. And then as soon as that anxiety passes, after a few days or a few weeks for some people, unfortunately, then things start going well again.
Hmm.
But some people never get out of that. And I think that's a hard pill for people to swallow because it's a lot harder of a thing to address than just, oh, I just need to eat less carbs. Oh, I can just put more chicken on this salad instead, you know? Um, and it absolutely, I have seen many people where we've tried to prep and their mental health like was in such a bad place that like it just didn't work.
Hmm.
And we take time off, and next year, all of a sudden, now they've got things in check and they're in a much better place, not only with their mental health themselves, but maybe with the sport. And the diet's easy almost.
That's so important that you have a solid base for your prep. I talk with every client that want to compete 6 months out. Okay, we need to be at this point before we starting the prep. So, for example, even your financial situation, you need the money, your metabolism should be running high, your mental stress should be managed. What other things are you looking for before starting a good contest prep?
I mean, yeah, so the numbers for me for calories, I know that somebody's in a really good spot if they're at 15 times their body weight in pounds.
Hmm.
Um, so 15 times per pound their body weight in calorie intake. So if somebody was 100 pounds, I would be looking for them to be maintaining weight at least at 1,500 calories per day.
Hmm.
Um, and then I like to keep cardio somewhere between 1 hour to 2 hours total for the week, even in off season, just
Hmm.
for metabolic and cardiovascular health stuff. Um, I know some people, they're like, I want no cardio if you can manage it. Just depends on the person and the lifestyle. But I mean, the mental health is a big one. There are definitely some people that I have chosen not to work with just because on the phone I could tell
Mm,
that there would be some issues. It was quite obvious, like maybe people that are still in the middle of eating disordered behavior and
no.
recovery stuff. Um, but I mean, if you want to look at it at the brass tacks, like, and it's weird to say you can't care too much about competing if you really want to do well, but you almost can't care too much about competing if you really want to do well because it just puts the stress on you. But yes, financially, you need to be in a good place. Relationship stuff can be in
Mm,
different places. That's okay. It's okay to start dating somebody new in prep. You just have to set boundaries and be honest with them. Um, Sometimes it's like, honestly, getting away from your family. Not everybody has a super supportive or understanding family. So, like, being out of the house so you can control your meals. But realistically, I think if you don't kind of feel like a bodybuilder and competitor before you start prep, you're probably not where you need to be.
yeah.
If I were to simplify it into like that kind of ideal. Um, Most of the stuff should be uh, pretty much if you're having to make night and day different changes,
Hmm.
like it's gonna be hard.
It
It
should
should
be
kind
more
of be
like a
like,
lifestyle.
right. So for me, for example, all I do the same breakfast almost every single day. I have a couple of options that I go to.
Hmm.
So if I start dieting, I'm not going to do whole eggs with yolk. I'm going to do egg whites or egg substitute. And maybe I'm not going to do full fat cheese. Maybe I'll do a fat-free cheddar or a low-fat cheese, depending on where my numbers move to. It's kind of the same food. I'm just changing some of
Mm.
the ingredients a little bit to lower calorie value. So things really need to be in that kind of place where you have that lifestyle down 100%.
Yeah, right.
Maybe 90% even.
Yeah, yeah. It's easier to go into the prep eating maybe the same foods, just a little bit less of them.
Yep.
And maybe move a little bit more and not change your whole routine because in the off season you was eating like a pig. So that's really important. And now talking about preparing for the prep, before the prep, do you look at blood markers or something else other than the routines and habits?
Yeah, and so there are plenty of people that send me their blood work. I can look at it, but with the way that the laws are here, as soon as I interpret anything or give anybody any kind of diagnosis, I open myself up to legal trouble.
Mm,
Um, so normally, if somebody's asked me, like, and to be fair, when you get your blood work, you see the ranges, and they tell you generally speaking what's in and out of range, at least for the normal definitions. Depending if you go to different clinics, they might say, yeah, this is maybe in range, but it's not optimal.
mm,
Um, so on and so forth. I try and encourage people to say, okay, cool. You can pay out of pocket to get a full blood panel done for most people cheaper than what they would have to pay for insurance here in the States. Um, they can then take that to an endocrinologist or somebody that will understand it a little bit better if there's something that's off or that we're concerned about. Generally speaking, again, the biofeedback will tell. Um, if they're still tired, if they're still gaining weight on macros that aren't where they were at before the last diet started, and the lifestyle stuff is still the same. Like there's a bunch of other indicators that I'll know beforehand. So I don't even have to typically get there. I'll say, yeah, but look at all these things. None of these things are back to normal yet. How can we expect the prep to go normally or to
yeah.
go as expected if everything else, if all these other things are still off? But I'm also very big on taking enough time off. Like generally speaking, if we've prepped, I want an absolute minimum of 6 months away from dieting.
Hmm.
Um, Realistically, more. If you're a natural athlete, you need more time to grow, anyways. Um, but just general rule of thumb, the more time you spend away from dieting, the easier your next diet will be. So I really try to encourage people to take time to grow and take time in their off seasons. Um, it's just not only is it one of the best things for their health, it's one of the best things for their bodybuilding career, so to speak, too.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I see the same. I do a pre-prep phase sometimes, but it's more like 6 months out. So let's say you do 8 weeks of cutting, and then maybe 6 to 9 months of gaining again, so eating enough. Maybe not always gaining all the time, but eating in a slight surplus, and then go into the prep and not because I see some coaches doing this pre-prep phases maybe 3 months out, and then maybe have 2 or 3 months eating a little bit more, and then going back to the prep phase. Maybe for pro athletes, it's different. They need
Yeah,
to stay in shape most of the time because they're competing more.
it depends on the pro.
Mm,
If you're perfect and your feedback has changed nothing every time you're on stage, then you probably don't need the same amount of time off to build and that somebody else would to get better or to make the changes the judges want. Amateurs don't have that issue. Um, that they're not in that crowd. But most pros still get feedback. I have a pro that's
mm,
a year and a half into an off season right now, and she still has more growth to do if she wants to keep up with um, the standard. She's an F class and went pro weighing 114 pounds,
Oh, okay,
which
really
is a
light.
very, very lightweight.
F class is how the height is. How tall are they?
It's the second, so it's like between 5'6" and 5'7".
Okay, so
And in
around
centimeters, I
about,
have no idea.
I think 168
Yeah,
centimeters and 140 pounds. That's roughly 52 kilos. Okay, 52 kilos and 168 to 170. Yeah, there. She's really
yeah,
light.
yes. So she just has to build. Now but the other things are great. Like her metabolism is good. She's eating a ton of food. She's training well. She recovers. All that stuff's good. So for her, if she wanted to diet and prep, we could. We just have to set expectations accordingly. It's different. There's no points anymore, right? There used to be points for Olympia qualification. You got to win a show now.
Mm.
Um, so it's the pre-prep phase. Man, I'm not a huge fan of mini cuts either, if I'm being honest.
Mm.
Um,
There was a
because I
big
feel like,
mini cut movement some years ago, even here in
yeah,
Germany.
I feel like it's a band-aid for a different problem. And the different problem was we either didn't control ourselves well enough coming out of prep. That could be because of how we prepped and prep practices. It could be mental, whatever the case might be, or we didn't keep things tight enough. If you want to be a good high level competitor, I think you need to stay a reasonable amount within your stage weight. I would say
Mm.
if you can stay maybe 7 kilos above for most people, um, that's a tight physique. And so if you're healthy there and you feel good, now dieting for the next show is very easy.
Mm.
Um, you don't have to do another mini cut or something. And you could be 10 kilos and still probably be okay for some individuals. Not if you're, in A class though.
No.
So it is relative. Um, but the reason I don't like them is we don't normally learn to fix how we come out of a diet by just dieting again. We have to work on those things when hunger's not a huge issue, when we do feel good for the most part. And if we just go back into another mini cut, generally speaking, normally it means you have to be really aggressive again because you haven't had time to really recover from the diet and had enough time away from the last one. So you're probably having to go into a bigger deficit than you would have to either otherwise. And so now your recovery phase is now lengthened again
Hmm.
because we got back into the diet phase early. It can be the right call for some people. I just don't like it. My preference and what I do with some people is I do almost like a matador approach, and maybe we start the diet
Ah,
instead of 6 months out, eight
yeah.
months out. And so we'll do a couple weeks of low calories, and then we'll go back to maintenance for a couple
You're
weeks.
referring to the Matador study.
Yeah, so it's like
Can
two
you
weeks of
maybe,
dieting,
yeah.
2 weeks off of dieting, 2 weeks
Mm.
on dieting, 2 weeks off of dieting. And I've done 1 week versions of that for other people. I've had doctors where they would work a week and then they would have the next week off, and so we did like a 1 week on, 1 week off approach. um, but I like that approach a little bit more because it kind of gets them into the dieting mindset, gives them a break, and so I try and see if I can feather that one out with people instead. Um, just because I really like off season to be off season.
Yeah, yeah.
I like it to be a time not just to build, but to live, to go snowboarding or skiing with your friends and not have to be as overbearing about, how you eat or what you do. To be able to go on a trip with your partner and be able to not have to stress out so much if you want to have a glass of wine.
Hmm.
Um, it's a weird thing to see some people, and if that's the life they want, great, only live for bodybuilding. And that's probably a weird thing to say from a guy who makes a living off of bodybuilding, essentially.
But
Um,
it's honest.
yeah, I mean, there's so many other things in life that I also love. I love doing jujitsu. I love playing music. I love snowboarding. Like, those are all parts of who I am. Am I
Mm.
a bodybuilder also? Yeah. But I'm not only a bodybuilder. Uh, and this is one of the things I see for a lot of newer competitors. They almost invest their entire identity just into the sport.
Hmm.
They forget about all these other pieces of who they are. And so maybe relationships suffer and their other hobbies suffer. And then if the bodybuilding thing doesn't work out on their timeline or the way they thought it would, like that's a hard thing to be left with. Okay, so who am I now then?
Yes,
Um,
that's a big problem. What I tell my clients is the same. I have young clients between 20 and 25, and I know they are really hyped about the prep. I want to go on stage, I want to be in the best shape, but I try always to let them see that the life, we are a little bit older now.
yeah.
We are over 30. And I had these times too, really strict with the diet in the off season. Everything is around bodybuilding. But it's more about having a great life and bodybuilding be a part of that. Or
Yep.
maybe even better, that bodybuilding and doing contest prep, doing a prep, enhances your life because you
Yes.
learn a lot of things. And it's not the only thing that you have in your life.
Yeah. And I think that's because also like if bodybuilding is all you have in your life, I think it makes prep harder because if I'm in prep, I can go play music and I can get a break from
Mm.
being in prep. I still do jujitsu in prep. Well, guess what? I'm not thinking about dieting when I'm trying to not get choked to death, you know?
Yes.
Um, so those things are also really important ways to make your prep better because they're also pieces of stress management to some degree. They're pieces of like how do we make this more reasonable for ourselves? It can get our mind off of things. Used to be riding motorcycles. Um, so it doesn't necessarily have to be any one thing or another, but yeah, we are the old guys. We're the downer. They're just excited to do it, and we're like, yo, it's cool. Don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
but
You remember maybe when you went to the gym the first time? I was 16 years old, so 22 years ago. And the older guys coming to me, don't overdo it, don't lift too much weight, you will regret it. And I was always laughing, yeah, 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 don't talk about that, I'm different. And now I'm at the age that I see, okay, I have some aches and pain. And life is more just about counting macros. So
yeah, I mean, I enjoy the gym. Don't get me wrong,
yeah,
but like
it's great.
I used to think that I was gonna be some men's physique champion. Like, dude, now, nope. And granted, men's physique was very different when Mark Anthony won the Olympia than
Yeah.
now with Aaron Banks and some of the other guys. But you put me next to Aaron Banks and some of the other, it doesn't matter how much muscle you put on me. I'm never beating those guys. Never. Um, so it's like, all right, well, I can accept that. What am I really good at? And I think that's kind of one of the reasons that honestly allowed me to succeed as a coach, where a lot of others failed, is I wasn't a competitor that coached. I was
Mhm.
always coach first. And so I didn't want to be a coach that doesn't compete because you have to understand what you're asking other people to do. I think that's another thing too. Coaches that don't compete are a red flag to me because
Mhm.
they have no idea what it feels like to do what they're telling you to do.
It's
Um,
different to say, yeah, I lost 50 pounds and yeah, so I can coach now athletes going on stage. That's different because going on stage in real stage conditioning, it's a different animal.
Not even just that, but like if you're a competitor that coaches, what happens when you have client and I've seen this happen with coaches, what happens when you have a client doing the amateur show at a show that you're doing the pro show at? Where is your attention really being spent? Is it to
Mm,
making sure that you're as competitive as possible, or is it to making sure that they're as competitive as possible?
true.
And clients and athletes see that. I mean, no matter how much we want to maybe cover it up or whatever, they see that, they perceive that. And so if I think this is something that some of the athlete first people struggle with because then you lose clients over it and people talk. Reddit exists, I think, to just be a negative space for humans to expunge hate. Um, there's a lot of cool stuff on Reddit too. Don't get me
Yeah.
wrong. But like, if you've ever seen the Bikini Talk forum, like, whew, like you
Yeah.
better watch out, man. Um, so it's like I never what like when I was since I've been coaching, I've never had this idea of grandeur for myself. I always knew that my talents lied in helping other people. And so it's always coach first. And even when I prepped for my last one, I was like, if it affects work, I'm done. If it affects my marriage
Mm.
or my relationship, I'm done. Like if it impacts these things, I'm done. These are my non-negotiables. And I don't think that people recognize that our clients see that as well, uh, just across the board.
Mm. It's really important. So, I think it's a good thing that we done both. We stepped on stage, we had our maybe extreme phases, but now we can see the big picture and give this experience to our clients, and that's I think really valuable for them because we just don't say it to say it, but we had the experience with this. So yeah,
I mean,
that's
I've done
important.
70 carbs a day. I've done all the
Yeah,
hit
me
cardio
too.
sessions. Dude, I was doing that while I was interning for college and working full time.
Wow,
I
crazy.
was working in cardiac rehab for my internship. I was waiting tables Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, working doubles, and I was prepping on like 70 carbs and hit cardio and all the rest. I've done it all.
Who was your coach
Um,
back then?
that was Paul.
Yeah, with Paul.
Yeah,
Yeah, because
that was Paul back in the day.
I need to say something because some people say, yeah, if you go too extreme low in carbs or in fat, your coach, you should fire him because it's bad. But to be honest, to say the truth, the reality, sometimes it's needed to go low with the calories or to do more cardio. You can't always pretend to eat a lot because you maybe have another method or your um coach evidence based. So it's not that
I
shows
mean,
if you're a good coach.
yeah, and it depends too, because I had been competing for like 3 years in a row. So of
Mm,
course, when you compete year after year, every subsequent prep is a little bit harder
yes.
and a little bit harder. And it's, again, if you didn't control how you came out, dude, after my first show, I gained 17 pounds. So we'll say 8 kilos in a week. And it didn't go away, you know?
Yes.
Um, so, if, and it's relative too. If your stage weight's going to be 94 pounds, well, then, 70 carbs isn't the same for you as it is to somebody that's their stage weight's going to be 170 pounds. Um, so I think the relative thing is important. And where I see like, are your carbs low? Most people that I have talked to talk about calories, but I see a lot of people's calories padded by a ton of extra protein. So their calories might not actually be that low, but like their carbohydrates and fats are like really are
Mm,
low. Maybe they're at like 60 carbs and 25 fats, which are I would say at 70 is probably my bottom end for carbs at this point.
mm,
I have put people lower in the past. Um, at this point, I just don't feel like it's worth it.
mm.
I will normally keep them a little bit higher on food and get them to move more. I'll use more cardio. But some people are hard to lose. Like genetics play a role. Your dieting history plays a role. Like all of it plays a role. Did you need to lose, 8 kilos or did you need to lose 16 kilos? Like all that stuff matters. Um, and so we don't here's the hard part. We don't always control like where people are coming from. As
Yes.
much as I want people to be in a good spot, they're not always. And the truth of the matter is it arguable? Is it reasonable? Yeah. Is it going to suck for a little bit? Yeah. But like, what's the length of that too? You know? Oh yeah, like my coach put me on 70 carbs and we're, 5 weeks out because he wants me to be ready early and I'm a couple pounds off, and this will
Hmm.
allow us to pull food up into the show more so that we can be eating more going in instead of trying to wait till last minute to get the. I think that those are some of the details that a lot of people miss out when they talk about this stuff. Now, if your coach has you on like 30 carbs and 20 fats for 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks, like that's a problem, you
Yes.
know. And you probably already know that because you feel it. But are we pushing hard for a week or two and then pulling back and taking a diet break? Or we maybe pushing hard for 3 days and then having a refeed day and recovery day with less cardio, and then maybe pushing hard for a couple days and then having a refeed day with
Mm,
recovery, and less cardio. So I feel like it's tough because there's a big part of me that wants to be like, yeah, that's a pretty good rule in general rule of thumb to say, you know, that's probably not a great thing. But there's definitely other thoughts and other ways that like, all right, well, those days are really low, but we have some pretty aggressive refeeds.
mhm.
Overall calorie intake for the week is still reasonable.
Yes, right.
Okay.
And maybe the
Um,
effort can lock in better. You say, okay, I have 5 days now really pushing hard and then refeeding, reducing
yeah.
stress, and then we go again. It's better than being every day low calories.
Yeah. And so yeah, some people that's what it takes. It's unfortunate. And that's a decision that like you and your coach should be able to make together with. Because I'll normally tell people straight up it, I don't like pushing this hard.
Mhm.
I'm not super comfortable with these calories, but I think it might be necessary if we're gonna hit where we need to be for conditioning. Um, and we can try it for a week or two and then go from there
Mhm.
and see if we're responding, see how we feel. But that's normally like we've done the diet breaks, we've done we've done all the stuff at that point. That's kind of last resort. And like I had somebody come from France to do the Pittsburgh show. I pushed her hard as shit, you best bet. Because I wasn't wasting that money and I wasn't wasting that trip.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
I was like, and we had that talk. Um,
Yeah, that's good because
and
you
some
as a
people feel
coach,
good there.
yeah, you as a coach, you are investing the same time, maybe money, energy, stress. So it's right. Sometimes you need to push it, and like you said, you talked about that in front and said, okay, hey, we need to do this. Are you ready?
Yeah, that's another thing that I found when some coaches, and maybe you're one of, I don't know. Do you charge your clients to be at their shows?
Not charging for my time, but if it's a big investment, like I have 6 clients competing and my expenses are 1,000 euros, I will charge from every client a little bit just to compensate. So
Uh,
it's just a big amount and I have a lot of clients. But here in Germany, no, I don't charge for going 2 hours with the car or 3 hours with the car. For you in USA, 3 hours is nothing, but there I
yeah,
don't charge the time. So if I'm all the weekend working there, doing tanning and helping
yeah,
everyone backstage and eating nothing because you're so stressed out, no, I don't charge this.
yeah. So that's not, I've never charged a client to be at their show
Yeah,
ever.
that's great. That's really
Um,
great.
so granted, like if I'm traveling, I normally travel with Paul, and so normally he covers
Mm.
where we stay. If I'm not traveling with him, I cover that. But that's a big expense too.
Yeah, that's
So like
a
when we
lot.
travel, like it's not cheap. So yeah, there's definitely financial investment in there too.
Yes.
And I'm very cheap as an individual.
How many shows do you watch live where you travel?
So the most shows I've been at in person in a year is probably 28.
Wow, crazy. All in the
Um,
US or
no, that would have been including some of the years where I traveled to Europe as well.
mm.
Uh, last year was low because I had stomach surgery. Although I did go like 4 weeks after my stomach surgery when I still couldn't eat solid food to Texas for one of my clients' pro shows for her pro debut. Uh, and then the year before that was low because of the knee surgery.
Mm.
But you know, it's interesting. The shows have been very small here in the States lately.
Mhm.
And we talked about this a little bit because you said over there they've been bigger. Um, the natural shows over here have been very busy though. Like
Okay.
we just had a natural show about a month ago that had 200 competitors
Wow,
for an NPC natural show, which is wild.
that's a
Uh,
lot.
because, you know, last year. I think there were 50 total bikini competitors at the first Junior USA show, which
Hmm.
has four pro cards on the line in the for the top four in the overall Go Pro, which is nothing. Like it used to be 150 at that show
Wow.
when we would go. So at least here in the States, what we've been seeing is that um, the number of female competitors has been declining um, at a lot of these NPC shows.
You told me before off air that in the US there are more bikinis switching now to fit model,
Way more,
way more.
way
Can
more.
you explain it or can you tell me a little bit about that?
So
What's
I
happening?
yeah, I think it's because, well, one, fit models is a little bit cheaper. I don't think most
Mm,
women here in the States are see the level of muscularity that is winning bikini shows and at the pro league level. I don't think they see that as something they want for themselves.
mm,
And then on top of that, women don't want to, I think generally speaking, they don't want to have to do drugs to compete. So when you talk about going back to 2015, 2016 bikini, which is what fit model is supposed to be, it goes back to a spot where you can do that naturally and still do quite well and be competitive. Um, now, the criteria for what we see for judging, I don't think we're going to really know exactly what they want or have a better idea until at the end of the year, probably, when there's been more time for them to really nail it down. But like yeah, a lot of like I said, most of my competitors are natural.
mm.
Like they can't keep up with the standard that is bikini. They don't have the genetics to build that much muscle. Not many do
Yes.
naturally.
And even if you take drugs, it
Still
doesn't
hard.
mean, yeah, it's still hard to get there.
Yeah. So it's one of those things where it's like, I think that's been a really big one. And we were kind of talking about, I think for Europeans, most Europeans don't have to go to a gym to be healthy or to be fit or in shape and, athletic to some degree. But Americans, I think it's very different. They kind of do. And so I think they get exposed to it very big. And so more people are exposed to the sport. And I think that's why there's been such excitement with Fit Model, because I think it fits more so what people, a lot of women want to look like.
Mm,
And then how they want to work out and the lifestyle they want around that too.
yes. That's more achievable and yeah, you don't need to use drugs. And here in Germany, it's different. I think it will need some years that fit model will be really big here. Right now, maybe we have three or four competitors in fit model and 30, 40, 50 in bikini. But I hope it will change. Even my own clients that are maybe first timers, some of them I tell them, hey, do you thought about doing fit model? Because maybe it's better for you right now. You need more muscles. But a lot of them tell me, yeah, I know I'm not big enough, but I like the bikini. I like the posing. I like the what they're wearing. So I
Yeah.
can understand it. Yeah, it's more f flashy and you know,
I don't think many people like the stallion pose or the front pose for Fit Model.
yeah, yeah.
Um, I kind of wish that they had just done the same front pose, but
Hmm.
had a different standard. Um, so that one I do get that feedback, and I've had plenty of people share the same feelings with me. And then that the sparkly bikini is just feels more fun. It feels
Mm,
more special.
yes.
But I mean, like was it's expensive to get into the sport. If you can get an $80 bikini and do fit model while you're learning whether or not you even like it, that's a lot less than having to spend $500 or $600 on a bikini.
Yes.
Um, Especially like I've had people that didn't like the sport. They're like, yeah, this isn't for me.
Yeah.
Now, what do you do with that $500 bikini you just bought?
And you can learn to diet and to function at the same time and to see, okay, how you need to develop the skills during the diet. Okay, I need to
Yeah,
still to train hard. I need still to do my work. Maybe I have kids or other things to do and other responsibilities. And maybe the fit model is the right division to start with this journey and to see if it's for you or not.
I mean, I have clients that have been training 7, 10 years. Like they're not going to put on much more muscle.
Mm.
Let's be real. Let's be honest. That it's not that they can't still build more muscle, but it's going to be very slow and it's going to be very minor.
Yeah.
They're not going to fit into the current bikini standard. They fit into fit model almost perfectly.
Yes.
Um, and then that's the question of, well, where do you want to compete? What's more important to you as an athlete? That you are more competitive in your class in respective sport, or that you have the look and are doing the thing that you want to?
Yeah.
Because I've had
That's
plenty of clients that have gone into classes that they are less competitive in because that's where they felt like they identified better and they wanted to compete there, even though we talked about the fact that they didn't fit the criteria as well.
mm. Yeah, and it's at the end you're going on stage, investing so much, and then you get maybe last place or just last call out, and it's not worth it in my opinion. It's better to go in your division where you are more you can compete in the front and maybe do a first place or first call out. It's more enjoyable, yeah, at the end. So yeah, bikini is more glamorous than fit model, but I hope more competitors will compete in the future in this division here in Germany. It's nice to see because they're not so shredded. You maybe as a coach don't need to push them at the end to the
Yeah.
end. So yeah, it's better.
And it might not stay that way. Like, here's the thing,
I,
like bikini's more prestigious right now
yeah.
because bikini's been around for, over a decade. And we all know it. Like
Hmm.
there may be a point like when the fit model competitors are the ones that have all the followers, and that's where the influencer, like,
Hmm.
if Lorelei only competed, people probably wouldn't know her the same. But she's
Yeah.
very popular on social media and stuff too. Like those two things, they're connected, but they're also separate. So that like notoriety of fit model, of course, it's nothing. It just started. So I would encourage people to be a little bit maybe more willing to possibly try it out. People used to think that TikTok was going to go nowhere. People thought Facebook was a joke, you know. So there will be opportunities there. And remember, there's a difference. We get into this bodybuilding world very easily. And this is one of the things I try really hard not to only get caught up into the bodybuilding world. But we forget that we are a very, very small portion of humans in the world. Um, and so some people, maybe they're trying to make a living with their physique. All right. What's going to be more sellable to the most people? What's going to market you the best?
Mm.
And obviously we live in the age of influencers where this stuff now matters. Um, so like
Yes.
depending on what you're thinking and what you want to do and what matters to you, what brings you joy and fulfillment, you know, look at the long-term stuff too. What do we always encourage people to do? Look at the long term. Don't just get stuck in the moment, right?
Yeah.
So look at the long term too. I would encourage people to understand that in another 5 years, um, I think Fit Model will be more popular than Bikini. One of the national shows coming up this upcoming weekend has more Fit Model than Bikini
Wow. Great.
signed up, at least as of last week. Like
Mm.
there were more. So I
Yeah,
think it will
and most of
quickly
the
over time.
times, what happened in the US, it needs 5 to 10 years, and then it will happen here in Germany and in Europe the same. So let's
Yeah,
see if it's true. Maybe before we, I would say ne I will invite you again if you want.
of
Then
course.
we can talk about the post-competition phases and maybe other stuff revolving bikini or female contest prep. But another question is about the peak week.
Yeah.
You said something about peak week. That's the magic week where you're getting in shape. No, but what what are your opinion on the peak week? So I saw crazy protocols cutting water, cutting sodium, also cutting salt. How do you
And then they
approach
passed
the,
out on stage, right?
and then they passed out on stage, or maybe they cramp and
Yeah.
don't get on stage.
Hmm.
What are your approach for the peak week?
All right, so anti-marketing coach Steve comes back again. Um, I think in general, most of these things are less complex than what people like to make them out to be. Um, they make them more complex by changing everything. Your body is very, very on it when it comes to water and fluid balance, osmolarity, those kinds of things, right? Um, so I keep water pretty darn stable. I give everybody a questionnaire. I tell them normally about 4 weeks out, I want you to really pay attention to your fluid intake and your sodium intake. I don't necessarily need you to change them. I just want them to be around an average within about 10%. So if you're getting 3,000 milligrams of sodium on average, I want you to be in between that 2,700 to 3,300,
Hmm.
right? And if you're getting, you know, 4 liters of water, I want you to be between 3,600 and 4,400 milliliters. Um, Simple. That way it's predictable.
Hmm.
If you're all over the place, things are hard to predict. So I know a lot of coaches like to do depletion days at the beginning of peak week. I'm hit or miss on that. If you are lean enough, you do not need a depletion day. Um,
You
if you're
had
in
six
between
months of
shows,
contest prep. You're depleted.
yeah, exactly. Especially as you're coming out of the hardest part, you're probably pretty depleted. Um, so you don't need them. For some people, if we're like, okay, maybe we can get a little bit better, maybe I'll do a couple depletion days of higher cardio and maybe, lower carbs. But otherwise, it's pretty linear in terms of I'm bringing carbohydrates up throughout the week. At a certain point, I'll bring fats up to make sure that we have enough for digestive health. And I'll bring protein down normally towards the end of the week to again help with digestion. Um, a lot of people like that backload option where the beginning of the week is all pretty low or moderate, and then you have one or two really high days right before the show. But as we talked about before, that can be really hard on digestion.
Mm.
And then the other problem is you either get it right or you fucking miss. Like you're way off. Um, like if you've never had an athlete spill, it sucks. I had a guy who he just overate. And it's happened with girls too. But this one guy really sticks out in my mind because he probably would have went pro.
Oh
He
shit.
was that good. And he just overate his carbs by probably about 4 or 500. And
Oh.
he wasn't one of those people that could handle a lot of food. And he literally looked like he had 15 to 20 pounds, so maybe 9 kilos of body fat is just
Hmm.
how he looked.
Hmm.
Just looked soft everywhere when he got on stage. I was like, what happened? So it's like those are the things that you risk trying to be aggressive with those backloads sometimes too. The linear load, it's very predictable. And I bring sodium up the last couple days coming into the show too, because it helps you to fill out. If you're lean, it helps you to look a little bit like crisper and tighter too.
Hmm.
It really brings it together. Um, the hard part for most people is show day, like because peak week's good for them. Like, oh, this is pretty simple. We have our workouts planned. I know exactly what cardio I'm doing. That's coming down throughout the week, and that's always dependent on what cardio, how much they were doing before. Um, Same with their food. Like if I've had some clients where they never got under 200 carbs. All right, cool. Well, we're going way up. I have some clients where they're at 70 carbs. All right, well, we might hit 160 to 200 grams day before the show, depending. And I normally have like a range planned um, for Friday or day before the show. So they kind of have an idea of where we'll be. But I have them checking in with pictures via text message every day. It's the one text message that I do a good job paying attention to. Uh, so that way, they're getting their weight. I'm getting pictures of how they look every morning, and I'm making sure that they're telling me how I feel. If they don't tell me enough, I ask them more questions. Some of my favorite questions are like, do you feel thirsty? Is your mouth dry? Are you peeing differently than normal, like more or less? Um, are you cramping? Because I want them. Those are like sodium and fluid balance problems that
Hmm.
are pretty easy um, to take care of. And so I make changes day to day based on how they're looking. If they're filling out well, I'm probably not going to add more food. If they're taking too long to fill out or they're not filling out like I want them to, I'm going to be more aggressive with food. Um, I use the burger and fries sometimes. I've used pizza for a client that was a vegan, which it was essentially dough and marinara sauce at that point, no cheese. Uh,
No veggies.
yeah. Uh, yeah, I stay away from too many veggies late in the week for digestion. That way, things are good. And I also ask them for what they typically eat so that I can kind of plan their show day meals. So I give them what I want them to eat and then the macros I want them to get as close to for each meal. The hard part for a lot of people, though, is the water and sodium on show day,
Hmm.
especially for people that have really high sodium. It's easy for them to get flat really quick. And I think this is where a lot of people eat, like if you eat carbs right before the you get on stage, they didn't get into your bloodstream into your muscles. You're so if you were really full last night and then you're a little flat this morning, or you were really full and looked perfect right when you woke up and now you're a little flat and you look a little bit softer, high likelihood it's your sodium in your water that are behind. Those tend to be the fastest thing. Most of your fluids are held within the cell. That's what makes you look bigger and better. I always like it's like a spandex bodysuit, your skin.
Hmm.
So the more that you push out against it, the more details that you see. If it's loose, you don't see the details, right? Um, so which can be a good thing or a bad thing depending who's wearing the spandex, right? Uh, I
Right.
was like, I hope they find me funny over there too.
I
Um,
think yes, of
good.
course.
Um, I've been so serious. It's the meds. Um, but so you want to have full glycogen stores.
Hmm.
The leaner you are, the easier it is to be more aggressive with everything because the harder it is to spill. Um, but it's not overcomplicating it.
Hmm.
And I know again, this kind of goes to the coaching thing, like, oh, you have to pay me for my magic bullet, my super secret trick that's going to get you to do it. But most people who cut water and sodium end up looking not great on show day and feeling terrible on top of it. So then they don't even get to enjoy the day that matters most, that you put at least 3 months of work into, all this money, all this time, all this effort. Then you feel like terrible on the show day and don't enjoy it. Looked not your best. And then you go out to eat. And then the next morning, like, oh my God, look, I look amazing. Well, what do you think was the difference? Was it one meal or was it the water and the sodium that you finally had that
Yeah.
allowed you to fill out and allow your body to actually work right? Um,
And sometimes it's the stress relief.
Sometimes for
Eating
some
and
people too, yeah.
oh, okay, tomorrow it's not the show day. Then the cortisol drops. Plus
Yeah,
the sodium in the water. Yeah.
I normally know that based on the client for sure. Um, those are talks I try, emphasis on try to have with people beforehand. But I feel like that is part of our job as a coach is to manage expectations.
Hmm.
When I had my first client in a pro show, Um, it was Chloe. I was like, don't expect first call out and to win. Nobody knows who you are. We don't know what judge is going to be there because it was COVID. I mean, it was
Hmm.
right when everything was getting shut down. And she
Yeah.
had tested positive for COVID. She couldn't do Romania, was her first pro debut.
Ah,
Couldn't
okay.
make it. And she had a few days and just barely made the I'm clear of COVID to go to Italy for her I don't know. Technically, her pro debut was the day after
Hmm.
at the show. Uh, and we weren't as good that day. And then her next show, I was like, don't have expectations. She got in second,
Hmm.
you know?
Well,
She That was San Marino Pro.
ah, yes.
Um, and I guess it was 2020.
I was
Um,
there in 2020, yeah,
mhm.
with a
And she
client.
beat Allison Tetsu that day. She
Hmm.
lost. Alessia Fascine was who won, uh, if I remember correctly. The Italian girl that everybody likes. I
Yeah,
can't
I
remember.
know. With the small
Yeah,
legs.
yeah, I can't remember her name right now. But yeah, like she was there, like
Mm.
so it was a good show with some Olympians at the time that she beat. I was like,
Yeah.
well, I'm glad we didn't have any expectations, but this is awesome, you know?
Yeah,
Um,
that's important. Maybe to do more shows, it's important too, if you're really
yeah,
anxious.
But like you know how it is. Like some first time competitors, they're like God's gift to bikini. They have
Hmm.
all the shape, all the structure, and it's just like, all right, cool. I just have to not mess you up. This is easy. And sometimes they're the most anxious, and it's hard because you're like, you could very well win an overall, or you could get last call out. You know, if you really off and mess it up. But you can't tell them that. You have to say, hey, look, we're going to be competitive. Like that's what we can ask. You look great. Are you happy with how you look before the show? Yes. Then you should be happy with how you look after the show,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Same body, same person, same stuff. Um, but like I've also had people with a fused spine get on stage and say, hey, look, we're not in the same boat as everybody else, right? I say to my masters competitors when they compete in open, you've had 3 kids, you're in your
Yes.
late 40s. The open's going to be harder for you because those girls don't have the same considerations that you do.
Right.
Um, so I do think that a big part of our job as coaches is being realistic with being realistic with expectations. Um,
Right.
Not that we don't believe in you, not that, we're trying to bring you down or be discouraging, but because we want you to enjoy it.
Right.
Like, we want you to actually, like you said, we want this to be something that makes life better. Um, and so realistic expectations help with that. Nobody gets mad at people for telling me I'm not going to be the next LeBron James. You know,
Yeah.
I don't.
But for bodybuilding, everyone thinks, oh, if I do the hard work, I will be pro next show.
Oh,
No, it's the same like all the other sports.
it's a weird dynamic, and I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
because people get into bodybuilding at a later age.
Hmm.
Like with most sports and athletics, you get weaned out as you go through school, right?
Yes.
So maybe as you're in your lates and you're getting ready to go to university, you either got accepted to university for sport or you didn't. And so you knew this is either for me, I'm going to make it, or I have a chance, or nope, I don't. Bodybuilding isn't like that. You pay the money, you can get on stage.
Yeah, and then maybe you see some great sensational athletes on social media right now, and you think maybe I have the same potential. If he can do it or she can do it, I can do it too. But that's
Which is inspiring. It's good.
it's inspiring, yeah.
I think that's a good thing, but you can do it. You can get better. You can get lean. You can get on stage. You can put on like you can do all those things.
Yes.
You're never going to look like that other person. You're
Right.
always going to be some shape and form of you.
That's
Um,
the point.
and then the other idea is this is just somebody's opinion. Like the day that we decide to stop competing, that opinion officially never matters again. So we're
Mm,
putting ourselves up against somebody else's definition and opinion of the standard for this look, which can change over time. We've seen it with bikini.
right. From show
Um,
to show.
so having that in mind and being honest with that, your prep's better when you don't put all that pressure on yourself too.
Right.
And it helps with the peak week. It helps with the prep and all the rest of the stuff. Um, so I do think that that is part of what we have to prepare people for too. Um, in terms of like what they expect going into the show, because we should, as coaches, should be shouldering most of that burden. You're
Right.
paying us to be worried about it. You're paying us to make sure that we're making the best decisions for you to be as competitive as possible. Like, give that worry to us. Let us take it. You know,
Yes.
because then again, the anxiety is real. It plays a role in everything.
We have the responsibility and we need to think about, okay, what's the next step? What we change or not change. And at the end, yeah, the client, the athlete is paying for the result or maybe for the bringing them through the process at best as possible. So
I think
they can't pay us for the result, so that's not
that
possible. Yeah.
yes, we don't control the result, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's the hard part. No matter how hard you can be the absolute hardest worker in the room that got on that stage and you could still be placed last.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
True.
it had zero impact on how hard you worked and what you did to get there. That stuff all still has it's just as important and it means just as much. It doesn't take away anything from that. And that's hard for people to recognize though. Like
Yeah,
that's a tough one to swallow and normally takes some learning the lesson in the way that's not necessarily feels great all the time.
great. I like what you said, and I think it's important that everyone that's listening now is thinking about himself. Um, how do you see the sport in yourself? So how do you approach the sport? And it can be really nice. You can enjoy it. You can enjoy the process, going on stage, maybe meeting other athletes, and not so much focusing on the result. And then it will be great. And maybe you will start again the next prep in 1, 2, or 3 years, and you will get better. And what I see often is they have the wrong expectations, and at the end, they maybe are last call out, or maybe even you are top five, but you want to win. You wanted to win, and then you stop completely with competing because you have the wrong expectations, and you put your yeah you're not happy just being there and doing all the stuff. You're just happy if you win, and that's not good. That's frustrating.
It kind of goes against the idea of bodybuilding in general,
Yeah,
right? The idea is that we're working on getting better year after year. Like
right,
it's this belief that no matter where we're at, we can always be a little bit better. And I think when you embrace that thought process of bodybuilding, like that kind of staple of it, yes, it makes you a better bodybuilder and it makes you a better athlete and competitor. But I also think that that helps you to be a better person, also,
right.
um, which there are plenty of people that miss out on that piece of it.
I think Alberto Nunes said one time that bodybuilding is so nice or competing because it brings out parts of you that will never be discovered
Yeah.
without, because it's such an extreme sport and you learn a lot about yourself. So it's a great experience if you do it the right way. So yeah, I would say we talked a lot, I think
Yeah.
more than 90 minutes, and we have check-ins to do, I think.
Everybody's turning us off. Yes.
Yes. So I would say let's cut it off here and talk maybe next time about other topics. Yeah, that's and that wraps up today's episode for the Team Pro Fitness podcast. So huge thanks again, Stephen, for sharing so much value and insight, especially for all the bikini athletes out there who want to prep smarter and coming strong, both physically and mentally. So where can the listener find you and your team?
So Instagram is normally the easiest. I'm not the best at putting up consistent content, but normally Instagram's where I'm at. I have a YouTube channel where I try to talk about health and fitness topics,
Hmm.
explain the science, those kind of things. Um, and everything for me is just under my name, Stephen Beaugrand. The company is Pro Physique. Most people probably know Paul Rovella if they know anything about bikini. Uh, and so those ones are very easy to find as well.
I will put everything in the description. And maybe the last question is not about now competitors and prep. If you're on an island lonely for 1 year and you have just three foods to bring with you, what do you bring with you?
Man, uh, popsicles. Yo, they're easy. They're like 10 carbs per. All right. That's easy
Yeah.
to fit, even if you're dieting. Yeah, it's got to be chicken breast, I guess. Oh, and I guess sweet potato for a carb if I had. Oh man, I have no fats. Oh, I need skinned chicken breast then.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
I could
that's
just.
great.
This is the problem.
I thought you would say I bring some pizza and then maybe a burger.
I
But
almost said pizza.
yeah.
I almost did.
And if you
Um,
have only three exercises that you can do for 1 year on a lonely island,
Deadlifts, squats, bench press.
nice. So like a
Pa
powerlifter.
Powerlifter lives on.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Plus they just work.
Yeah, you have
They
everything
have to be all
covered.
compounds. Um,
Mm.
Yeah, and maybe if I was a bikini competitor, I'd switch out the squat or deadlift for hip thrust.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but
For
again,
sure.
I keep it simple. It's easy.
That's great. So yeah, thank you, Stephen, a lot to take your time for talking with us and to share all your knowledge. And yeah, I wish you a nice day there. I think it's now what, 12?
Almost.
Almost, yeah.
The guten
So
Abend for you, right?
for us it's a guten Abend, yes.
Ja.
And so
Meine Deutsch
thank you a
nicht
lot.
sehr gut.
Ah, but it's before we stop completely because otherwise this athlete will kill me because it's a friend of mine. We have questions. Wait, just the last 2 minutes.
Okay. I'll be quick, I promise.
Question number one, enhanced, easier building lean muscle mass. So is it easier to build more mass enhanced?
Yes. There's a study out there in men that shows guys who took testosterone and didn't lift gained more muscle than guys who didn't take testosterone and did lift.
Yeah.
So there is no question. People use PEDs because they work.
Yes, right. Quick and simple answer. And the next one, the best way to get around delts in a natural way, training techniques, drop sets, reps. So do you have some recommendation to get really the bikini round delts?
All right, so you're gonna hate me, but I'll use myself as an explanation here. This is what matters for how round your delts are gonna be. And you can see
The
my
insertion.
deltoid inserts into the humerus way down here. And my delts aren't really that big and round. They're okay. So one, angle matters. No pump, but angle matters. But the thing that matters most is where this inserts. The longer it is, the harder of a time you are going to have getting those really capped delts.
Hmm.
Um, the shorter it is, the easier it will be for you. Um, so training techniques, intensities, I'd say most people overtrain. It's a I think it's in the industry because of the drugs. Drugs make you able to recover from it better, so you can get away with it. As a natural competitor, um, not the same uh, kind of thing. You have to be very aware of it. But a lot of people also have a hard time getting their traps out of it. Uh, so maybe if you have a workout partner, one of the things I love to do is I just come up behind a lot of my competitors when we're at the gym. I just hold their shoulders down when they're doing lateral raises. And it really like this is a short movement. Like your delts are strong, but it's not a long muscle. So it's not going to be this super huge movement up here. Um, a lot of them are very surprised at how much more they feel it in their delts, and how short the range of motion is for what they need to do that. You can look at like lengthened stuff. So like maybe cable deltoid
Hmm.
raises where you're really getting this
Stretch, yeah.
heavy stretch and coming into it. The lengthened partials and that lengthened portion of the lifts is really showing to be very beneficial in the research right now. Um, but I would say if you have the calf raise where you're standing, you could always bring it down enough to where it holds your shoulders down and do your deltoid raises there. If you want to use cables, if you want, you normally will need a handheld to get the stretch. But a lot of people have problems with cables because it's too heavy to get good
Hmm.
form. Use your glute kickback cuff, put it right
Hmm.
here at or above the elbow, and then that changes how far away it is. So it changes how heavy it's going to feel. That might help you to keep it a little bit better. But at a certain point, some of us are just going to have a real hard time. Make sure you can get a really good shoulder pump when you're on stage, and make sure you're
Yeah.
having enough water and sodium to keep it while you're on stage.
This is one of my clients, and for her it was on stage she was looking great, best conditioning ever. But during the reverse dieting, her delts was were popping. So she was getting fuller and fuller, and gaining some weight, and the delts was like that. So yeah, it's a good advice, good recommendation. Maybe next time we need to start earlier with the reverse dieting before the first show.
Yeah, I think that helps. 'Cause it's hard to be aggressive enough, especially like if it's the first show.
Mm,
Like I always tend to want to be a little bit more conservative. I don't want to go all out on that first show and then risk overdoing it and spilling and then really effing something up. Um, but yeah, it just sounds like she might even, or they might even just need a little bit more time to fill out.
yeah,
Some people it's hard. Um, Normally you're not your best on your first show. First show should always like you guys have to do a regional anyways to qualify.
right,
That should be getting like the tough one out of the way where we're not going to be quite our best. You just need to be high enough to qualify. Um, and then that way you can kind of because every prep's a little bit different, and then you can really nail it down on that like the second peak and the third peak if you need them. It just gets easier, especially because I mean you're like me, you want everybody to be lean enough for the first show anyways. So once they're lean enough for the first show, like the rest of them are super easy and straightforward,
right,
and it makes it really, really convenient to be as full as possible.
right, right.
Um,
So good advice. And yeah, thank you for that. I wish you
yeah, man.
a really nice day. And I hope to see you soon again, maybe in one show in US or in Europe. Let's see.
Yeah, come to Tokyo, Masters Olympia.
I would love to come to Tokyo. Yes, let's see, let's see. I wish you the best, Stephen, and yeah, thank you for taking your time. See ya.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.